So in today's video, we are going to be power ranking the AFC West after this year's draft. Now, before we get into the video, please consider liking and subscribing, and let's jump right into the video. So obviously, this list is going to be my opinion and my opinion only. If you disagree, I 100% understand if you disagree. We haven't even played a game yet, so it's going to be impossible to grade any of these teams, impossible to put them in a correct ranking 1 through 4. So this is just my opinion. It's based off their moves in the draft and free agency, and it's also based off of what we see on paper. So yes, this is all my opinion. It's in a way no hate towards some of these teams, because if we're being 100% honest, I despise how good each team in the AFC West has gotten this year. I don't feel like I can crap on really any team in the AFC West right now, and that really frustrates me. But let's get right into the power rankings. So coming in at number 4 is the Las Vegas Raiders. Now you're probably wondering why. They're one of the 2 teams that made the playoffs last year, so why would I put them at number 4? Well, to put it simply, I think the moves that the other teams made in the division were much better than the Raiders. But that's not to take anything away from the Raiders and what they did in their free agency and what they did in their draft, because I think they did a tremendous job of improving that football team from what it was last year. And keep in mind, this team made the playoffs last year. They were a Derek Carr interception away from possibly making things really interesting against the Bengals last year in the wild card round. So credit to the Raiders. They made it to the playoffs last year, and that interception could have changed maybe how things shaked out this past playoff run. But let's be real. That Raiders team, zero business being in the playoffs last year. The fact that they made the playoffs is probably the best thing a football team has probably ever done, maybe in my lifetime, because the distractions and the garbage that the Raiders went through last year, from John Gruden to Henry Ruggs, and they made the playoffs through all that. Derek Carr put his head down, put the work in, and got better, helped his team win down the stretch to make the playoffs. That is something I will honestly give the Raiders a ton of credit for and a ton of respect for. That was one of the most impressive things I may have ever seen, because the Raiders, zero business being in the playoffs last year. Absolutely none. And by all accounts, like I said earlier, this is all on paper. The Raiders have gotten much better. Obviously, the main thing they did was they traded for Davante Adams. And just by doing that, they get Derek Carr, his friend from college, his favorite wide receiver from college. Those two work together. So great things can be expected from those two already. Right off the bat, you add that with Josh Jacobs, Darren Waller, and Hunter Renfrow. Raiders, they have really good offensive pieces. It's now time for Derek Carr to take that next step. This is all on Derek Carr this next season, I really do believe. But from all the moves, and then the defense, they got the defense even better. They were able to sign Chandler Jones to go across from Max Crosby, so they have a really good pass rush. They were able to sign Anthony Averett from the Ravens, so their secondary got a little bit of help. And all in all, the Raiders, they had a really good offseason, obviously by adding Davante Adams. And I do really think that the Raiders, even though I have them number 4 on the AFC West power rankings, you could argue they're a top 10 team in the NFL. Coming in at number 3 is the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, I hope I'm not one of those people that are just buying into the hype of the Chargers like we do every single year, and especially coming from a Chiefs fan. But at the same time, I can't pass up the Chargers and the moves that they have made. The Chargers are legitimately made some really good moves this year, and if their head coach didn't make a mind-numbing decision last year calling that timeout, we may be talking about a completely different Chargers team. With the story of the Chargers may be completely different, but also there's one thing that, if we're, like I said, we're looking on paper, you give this Chargers team this defense they have on paper now, last year, they're not playing a Week 18 game on Sunday Night Football begging for a tie. They are playing a meaningless afternoon game against the Raiders, resting all their starters, and heading into the playoffs rested and ready to go. That's what I fully believe. The Chargers, they have an unbelievable offense. They have Austin Eckler still there. They extended Mike Williams. They have Keenan Allen. They drafted Zion Johnson on that offensive line to go along with Rashawn Slater. So they're giving Justin Herbert the help. And Justin Herbert's one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL. That dude took the NFL over by storm his very first start against the Chiefs back in 2020. And the dude hasn't looked back. So they have the offense to do it. And then on top of that, they have Corey Linsley on that offensive line. And then they just drafted Isaiah Spiller, a backup to Austin Eckler. And like I said, they have the weapons on offense. So they have a good offense. It's just their defense was just a disaster last year. Their run defense was a mess, and you saw it against the Raiders. Their run defense kind of cost them the game and their season and the timeout. So there was a lot of factors that the Chargers, if they would have had this defense that they have now, would have changed it. Because if you look at the defense that they have now. They brought in Khalil Mack. They signed Sebastian Joseph Day to help with the run defense. They added J.C. Jackson, and then they also just recently brought in Kyle Van Noy. So the Chargers, they have a lot of good pieces on defense right now. I really think the Chargers are going to be a force to be reckoned with. The Chargers, they made the right moves. The Chargers just have to stop, charging, because if they can stop doing that, they are going to be a legitimately good team in the AFC and in the AFC West, and they're going to be competing for a division title if they could just stay out of their own way. But I still, to this day, will always say that the Chargers, they should be thankful that they have a guy like Justin Herbert, because just the talent that he has, they are just getting in his way like crazy and kind of stopping him from reaching his full potential of making a deep playoff run. But if we're looking at the Chargers, I like their draft. I like the moves that they made on their defense, improving it, and I do really think that the Chargers are going to be a team to be reckoned with in the AFC West and in the AFC in general. Coming in at number 2 is the Denver Broncos. This one's pretty simple for me, and it'll be pretty simple until the season starts. They add Russell Wilson, and this team was a quarterback away from being a good team last year. They had an elite level defense last year that was probably good enough to contend to go to a Super Bowl if they just had solid quarterback play, and they couldn't even get that from Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock. So now that they have a legitimate quarterback, now they have a quarterback that we know what Russell Wilson can do. He was the life force of the Seattle Seahawks his entire time there. Now he goes to Denver. He gets great weapons in Tim Patrick, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, a great run game, and I think the Broncos, they're honestly one of the top 5-6 teams in the NFL right now, because as I mentioned, they still have a great defense from last year. That defense was more than good enough to make a deep playoff run on the defensive side of the ball. They gave the Chiefs troubles last year. They always play the Chiefs tough, it feels like. They definitely played the Chiefs tough in their very first game of the season on that Sunday Night Football game. That game was really close for the defensive side of the ball. The Broncos, if they had something that was comparable to an offense, they would not be losing to the Chiefs 13 times in a row. That defense last year was really good. They've had good defenses. It's just they haven't had any quarterback play since Peyton Manning left. But then you also add in Pat Shurmur as the offensive coordinator. It's really not a good mix, especially when you add Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock. But all in all, I think just adding Russell Wilson really helps the Broncos. And they already had Pat Surtain, they already had Justin Simmons, Bradley Chubb on that defense that ranked number 8 last year. They added Randy Gregory, DJ Jones. They draft tight end Greg Dulcich after trading away Noah Fant. So they addressed the needs that they needed to. They already have a great defense. Now it's just them. They got to put it all together. And I may be ranking them too high because we haven't seen anything yet. But all in all, what the Broncos did this offseason by adding Russell Wilson makes them a legitimate team and a legitimate contender in the AFC West. Which brings me to the number 1 team in the AFC West. That is the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, this is a team that's literally been laughed at the entire offseason. Now, obviously, if the Chiefs were to roll out the team that they had after losing Honey Badger, after losing Tyreek Hill, after losing Charvarius Ward, people would still be laughing, and I would have the Chiefs ranked at number 4, even with Patrick Mahomes as the quarterback, because I think Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the entire division. But if you look at that team after free agency first started and all the trades were happening, the Chiefs were not in a good spot. Let's be real. The Chiefs would have struggled really bad. Brett Veach kind of took it personally that everybody was laughing at him, and he had an unbelievable free agency and an unbelievable draft. He first started by signing Juju, MVS. They signed Justin Reed to that defense. Even with those 3 moves, I still thought the Chiefs had a fairly big hill to climb up. It was a great start. People were kind of upset that Brett Veach wasn't going big in free agency, signing any more big names. But once the draft hit and the draft came, Brett Veach absolutely nailed this draft. He got Trent McDuffie to help with the corner. He got George Karlaftis to help with the disaster that was the defensive line. He drafted Sky Moore to give the Chiefs more help at wide receiver after losing Tyreek Hill. Now, obviously, he's not going to be Tyreek Hill, but you look at this Chiefs receiving corps now, obviously, you still have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Credit to Brett Veach for fixing that all last year. But then you give Patrick Mahomes a plethora of weapons to throw to. Juju has shown that he can be a solid number 1 guy, definitely a number 2 guy. MVS has shown that he has game-breaking speed. You bring in Sky Moore, who's going to be, really good for the Chiefs. You have Justin Ross, who they signed as an undrafted free agent. He may make a splash. But then you also still have McCole Hardman, who is still there. And then you obviously have Travis Kelce, who is still a number 1 receiving threat, even as a tight end. So overall, the Chiefs, I think on paper, this Chiefs team might be better than any team that the Chiefs have had in the Patrick Mahomes era. there. They lost Tyreek Hill, they lost Honey Badger, but it looks like the Chiefs just went in a completely different direction after losing those two guys. They got versatile weapons on the offense, and on the defensive side of the ball, Brett Veach just went absolutely insane on the defensive side of the ball. Like I said, they drafted Trent McDuffie, George Karlaftis, they got Brian Cook, and this defense at this rate, they got Leo Chanel. Like, these guys are just gonna knock your teeth out. Like, this Chiefs defense, it's gonna be different, I think, than anything we may have seen in a long time. And you have to think, they still have Willie Gay there, they still have Nick Bolton there, they still have Chris Jones there, so they still have the pieces that were there from previous years. They just added a whole bunch of new pieces to this defense. They added different pieces to the offense. The Chiefs team is going to look different, but I don't think they're going to be bad. I think this might be one of the better Chiefs teams that we have seen in the Mahomes era, because it's not just going to be two guys anymore and Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. It's going to be at least five guys, at least. I would not be surprised if the Chiefs do not have a 1,000-yard receiver this season, other than maybe Travis Kelce, because he does that on a yearly basis. And it's just Mahomes spreading the ball around, and just everybody on that offense, all those receiving threats, all of them just making plays. So on paper, after the free agency, after the Chiefs draft, and a team that still has Patrick Mahomes, still has Andy Reid, won the division 6 times in a row, and has never missed the AFC Championship game with Mahomes, while they did lose Tyreek Hill, and while they did lose Honey Badger, I still think on paper, this may be the best Chiefs team that we've seen with Patrick Mahomes as the quarterback. But those are my AFC West power rankings after this year's draft. Give me your power rankings down below of the AFC West. And if you disagree completely, I understand. It's just on paper. It's just my list, just my thoughts. But give me your power rankings down below, and I'll see you in the next one.